Welcome to Backyard Wellness, a show that brings you healthy options from the community, the region, and even your own backyard. And today we're going to talk about urban canids. With me is David Drake. He's a professor and extension wildlife specialist in the Department of Forest and Wildlife Ecology from the University of Wisconsin in Madison. His research and extension programs primarily focus on wildlife and wildlife damage management in human-dominated areas. He also teaches an undergraduate course in wildlife damage management. Dave has a cross-country education. His baccalaureate degree in biology came from Macalester College. A graduate degree came from Texas A&M in wildlife and fishery science, and a doctorate in forestry from North Carolina State University. So welcome, David. Thank you for coming today.
Well, thank you for having me on, Lois.
Well, this is great. I'm really excited about this because I've told people about this project of yours, and they've all looked at me real quizzically about, oh, really? Tell me more, you know, that kind of a thing. So, but how did you get into this whole field of wildlife and wildlife management?
Well, I took a bit of a circuitous route in my life. I grew up outdoors, probably spent more time outdoors than I did indoors. And, you know, both my parents are scientists. My father was a geologist, retired now, and my mom was a science teacher. And so we spent a lot of time outdoors. I just started gravitating toward wildlife. And went to college and got a biology degree, and then did some things in between there, including training dolphins and sea lions and things like that. And then I went back to graduate school and decided I wanted to go into wildlife management, and did that at Texas A&M, and then continued on to North Carolina State. And even though I have a forestry degree for my PhD, my research was centered on a species of wildlife.
Okay, so you really have been trained across the country.
Yep.
I mean, working with dolphins, we don't have dolphins.
Yep. Not here. No, no. We may in the next glacial period. You never know.
Who knows what'll happen?
That's right. But no, currently we do not.
And
right.
So that kind of touches on what happened. You have this urban canid program. Now, how did that come about?
Well, before I came here to the University of Wisconsin, I was at Rutgers University, and that was my first faculty position right out of graduate school. And Rutgers is the state university for New Jersey. And if you've never been to New Jersey, it is the most urbanized state in the entire country. All counties in the state of New Jersey are considered an urban county. And so I got interested in urban wildlife at Rutgers. And then when I came here, I got hired here. I just continued that thread of wildlife research and teaching and extension here. And if you look at how our country is urbanized, you know, about 85% of the United States population lives in an urban center, and so we really are no longer a rural county or country like we used to be. And so most people's interaction with wildlife is at that urban interface. And I thought, what a great way to start talking about wildlife to people where most of the time that's where the interaction is occurring, in that human-dominated or urban landscape.
So more specifically, you saw it happening right down in Madison.
We did, yep. So specifically the Urban Canid Project came about, and again in kind of an unusual way, I guess, maybe. On campus at the University of Wisconsin, there's the Lakeshore Nature Preserve, which is a natural area of campus. And the manager of the Lakeshore Nature Preserve a number of years ago called me and said, you know, a lot of the users of the Lakeshore Nature Preserve, the public and the university community, as they're out there walking their dogs or running or walking, that they're reporting that they're seeing more and more coyotes out there. And a couple of the people are uncomfortable that the coyotes are approaching a little too close for comfort. And could you come out and see if anything was going on? So I had an undergraduate student do our independent research project out there, and we verified that surely there are coyotes out there. And then the next step was, well, let's figure out what they're doing, and the way to do that is to actually capture them and put radio collars on them. So I had another undergraduate student do an independent research project, and just as a pilot project, we caught 2 coyotes and 1 fox on campus and put radio collars on them and tracked them around.
A fox on the
as well.
campus.
Yep. And so we've got both coyotes and fox on campus. And then that kind of showed more interesting results, and so I thought, well, let's catch more of these animals, and not just on campus, but let's catch them throughout the city of Madison. And then I got a graduate student on, and so my graduate student's been with me for maybe not quite a year yet, and we've been catching coyotes and fox on campus, but then primarily on the west and south side of Madison, within what we call the Beltline, which is kind of this highway system that runs, kind of borders Madison. And so, and we've got a couple of goals to this project, but one is we want to see how these animals are navigating that very urban landscape, and how they are able to survive there with all the people and the infrastructure that is there to support humans primarily.
Yeah, what's drawing them?
Yep. Well, so coyotes and fox are what we call habitat generalists, and so that they can range across a wide variety of habitats, from very urban to brushy to forested habitats, to an extent to more of a pastoral type habitat. But they also are somewhat, even though we consider them carnivores, that they are primarily meat eaters, they are somewhat omnivores as well. And so they'll eat vegetables, and they'll eat berries and insects and things of that nature. And so because they're so generalist in their patterns, that allows them to be able to move into these urbanized areas.
But in the wild, they're not agreeable to each other, are they?
No, and that's the other thing. So we've got a number of goals for our project. My graduate student, his goal is mostly academic or more ecological in nature, and so one of the things we're looking at is competition between coyotes and red fox. And as you correctly point out, if a coyote catches a red fox in the wild or in rural areas, typically that coyote will kill the red fox. But in these urbanized areas like Madison, we're not seeing predation by coyotes on fox, and so what we're wondering is that competition relaxed in these urban areas, and partly because there's so many resources there, namely food. I mean, think about if you go into a city, think about how many gray squirrels and rabbits and things like that, small mammals there are, in and around people's yards and things of that nature. And both coyotes and fox eat those animals, those squirrels and rabbits, and because there's so many of them, we think that they don't have to necessarily compete for them, but they can share that resource. And so that will relax that competition, but that's one of the things my graduate student is looking at.
Well, that sounds crazy, because I always think of wildlife being impacted by urban development. And yet the wildlife are coming into urban development.
Yep, and so
that seems counterintuitive.
It does seem a bit counterintuitive, but there's different ways you can categorize or classify wildlife. So you can look at animals as mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians. You can look at them as game species, non-game species. You can look at them as endangered or threatened species. In the urban setting, we look at animals in three kind of categories, and so one is as an urban avoider, and so that would be something like a rattlesnake, for example, or some of your larger predators like wolves and mountain lions. Typically stay out of those urban areas because either there's not enough habitat for those animals, or they're not welcome there by the human beings. And so we have urban avoiders, we have urban adapters, and those are species that are very adept at coming into these urbanized areas and taking advantage of the habitat there. And so a lot of those animals are the generalist species that we just talked about. But if you think about deer, turkey, Canada geese, crows, skunk, raccoon, possum, things like that, are urban adapters. So those animals are able to adapt to that changing landscape or that urbanized landscape.
The list is large.
It is. It's very large. And as a matter of fact, if you go into those urban areas where you have deer, for example, white-tailed deer, and you look at deer, let's say in Madison, compared to deer out in the country, typically we have more deer per square mile, or we have a higher density of deer in the city because there's more resource for them to take advantage of than there is in the wild. And so we have what we call inflated or artificially inflated population numbers, because those animals have more resources they can take advantage of in those urban areas relative to the wild areas. And then the third category are what we call urban exploiters. And so these animals would be commensal rodents, for example. So it would be like rats or house mice or house or English sparrows, starlings, pigeons, animals that really rely on humans. And if you don't have humans in the area, typically you don't have many of these urban exploiters because they're commensal, or they're somewhat reliant or tied to human beings.
So you need the adapters and those resources.
Yep.
together
That's
in
right.
the urban area.
That's right. And so,
And if you're going out into the wild, then you could have all. No, you'd only. Oh, I see. Then
Yep.
there's the other two.
Yep, yep. And so coyotes and
different.
fox, for example, are urban adapters. They're examples of urban adapters, and so they've moved in from rural areas to suburban areas and now into urban areas, and so we're trying to understand how they're using those areas, about competition, and the third area that we're looking at is the health of these animals. So every animal that we capture, we draw blood on the animal, and we swab its nasal passage, and we swab its rectum, and then we collect feces, and we do a health screen on that animal to see what diseases either it's been exposed to or might be currently carrying, and then generally how healthy that animal is. And especially in the urban area, because coyotes and fox are essentially wild dogs, they will interact with domestic dogs, and they can transfer disease to domestic dogs. But domestic dogs, especially unvaccinated domestic dogs, can also transfer disease to coyote and fox. And so we want to understand how healthy these animals are, these coyotes and fox in the urban area, and what risk of disease transfer or transmission do they pose to domestic dogs, but also at what risk are these animals from the domestic dogs themselves.
So therein lies your public education.
Yep.
And what to do if you see one of these foxes, coyotes, or other adapters.
Yep, and so because I've got an extension appointment to my job that I do a lot of public outreach and public education, and this Urban Canid project is just rife with being able to educate people. And so we do it in a number of ways. So we have a Facebook page, for example, and a website that we relay up-to-date current information about what we're doing and the status of these animals and results we're finding out and things like that. So that's one way that we educate the public. We will invite the public to come and trap these animals with us. And so
Really?
we've had over 200 members of the public interact with us on this project so far, and probably we've had over 100 people come and trap with us. So we'll trap typically from November through March or so, and when we have the traps set, we've got to check the traps every day for the welfare of the animal, but also by law. And so we invite the public to come with us, and if we catch an animal, we'll put the public to work. They'll help us make sure the animal's healthy while we're working the animal up and things like that. But as we have the public with us, we talk to them about the importance of trapping from a research standpoint, but also a management standpoint.
And your trap is not like a metal thing that damages their legs
Nope.
or anything. It's kind of special, isn't
Yep,
it?
there's two ways we could trap these animals. One is what we call a cable restraint, and so that is essentially airplane wire that is in the form of a big loop, and that loop can slide up and down the wire. So that's a passive trap, and we'll set it so that as the animal's walking down a trail, for example, the animal doesn't see that cable restraint, and it puts its head through the restraint, and then once the restraint touches the shoulders of the animal, that loop, as the animal starts moving forward, the loop starts tightening around the neck. But it can only get so tight because there's a stop on that cable restraint, so the animal can never choke itself out or kill itself by choking itself. And so that's the primary way that we trap these animals. We could also use a foothold trap if we wanted to. We tend not to use foothold traps because we trap in the winter, and with foothold traps you have to dig them into the ground. It's difficult to do that in frozen soil. But the other issue is we do a lot of trapping, again, in these urban areas where dogs are, domestic dogs, and we don't want to trap a dog. We've never trapped a dog in the couple of years we've been doing this. But in case we do, it's much easier for the pet owner to get his or her dog out of a cable restraint than it is out of a foothold trap. And so that's why we primarily use cable restraint traps. And so it's a live trap, and once we catch the animal and we come upon the animal in the trap, then we use a what we call a pull noose to restrain the animal, and then we chemically immobilize the animal with a drug combination, so we can essentially knock the animal out for a period of time. And that allows us to safely work around the animal where the animal's not moving and trying to bite us, so it's safe for the animal, it's safe for us. And then, as I mentioned, we draw blood and collect other health information on the animal. We weigh the animal, and then ultimately at the end we put a radio collar around the animal. And once we've got the animal radio collared and we've taken all the health samples we need, then we give the animal another drug, reverse the first drug, wake it up, and we stay with the animal until it's up under its own power, and then we start tracking that animal on radio And for every week, at least once a week, we pick every radio-collared animal up to make sure they're still alive, and also to make sure we know where they are. And then we do some other things over the course of that week with the radio collars.
So what started out with 3 now has many.
Yep, I
How
think
many?
we're up to 14 maybe now. More coyotes than fox.
Oh.
And so that's been kind of interesting, and it's been interesting. We've trapped 2 different years. The first year we had, during our pilot study, we had pretty good trapping success. The second year we had to work a lot harder at it, and it's just the variability of trapping these animals. So
Are they becoming smarter?
I think it could be that a little bit. It's also, the first winter we did it, that 2 years ago. It was very, very cold. We had a lot of snow on the ground, and we didn't have as many people out and around where we were trapping. And I think this past winter it was more mild. We didn't have as much snow cover, and so the animals were able to move a little bit in greater distances where it was easier for them to catch food, for example. They didn't have to come to our bait pile. There was not as much incentive to come to our bait pile, for example.
You got a bait pile.
Sometimes we use bait, sometimes we don't. Yeah, it all depends on what the situation is. Yep. And so what we found so far has been kind of interesting. So the coyotes tend to stick to these green patches, like park systems and wild areas within the urbanized landscape. And they will certainly move off of those green patches, but they'll go from green patch to green patch more than they will go from green patch out into the city, for example. Whereas the fox they're much more of an urban animal. They are laying down and sleeping next to people's houses, for example, or they're walking right down the street. We've seen them on the Capitol grounds, right at the state capitol, for example. And so that's been interesting. Coyotes tend not to move as great a distance as fox do, so that's the other interesting thing. And then most of these animals, we'll see them at any point in the 24-hour cycle, but most of their movement patterns tend to be concentrated at nighttime.
So somebody sees it. What are you encouraging people to do about it if they see these things?
Yep. Well, for one thing, is enjoy the sighting. It's a pretty interesting thing to see a fox and a coyote. Not everybody gets to see that, for one thing. So we want to encourage people to enjoy the sighting, but we want to make sure they're enjoying the sighting from a safe distance, both for them and for the fox or coyote that they might be viewing. And so we want to make sure they're far enough away. And then we have got on our Facebook page and on our website, we started what we call an iNaturalist page. And so we're encouraging people, when they see a fox or coyote, to either email us the location, or more importantly, go to the iNaturalist page, register. It takes about 30 seconds to register as an iNaturalist user. And once you've registered the first time, you don't have to do it again. And then you can log into that iNaturalist page where you saw the animal, when you saw it, what was it doing, and things like that. And so we're collecting data, kind of a citizen science type project as well, where we're asking people to report into us the animals, where they're seeing them, what that animal is doing, and that helps us understand, because we don't have as many animals radio collars as we'd like, so it helps us understand where these animals are across Madison, but it also helps us understand when we start trapping again. We'll look at that iNaturalist page and we'll start concentrating our trapping efforts either where we have not caught animals yet, and or where there's concentrations of animals. And so the iNaturalist page helps us understand where these animals are.
To learn more about the territories
Yep,
then.
absolutely.
And their needs.
That's right.
So basically you're telling people to look at them, report them.
Yep. Enjoy
What else?
them.
What else if they're walking their dog and they see one across the trail?
Yep. So
What are they supposed to do
obviously
then?
there's a size difference between fox and coyote.
Yeah.
Red fox are maybe 15 pounds or so, the size of a large house cat. Coyotes are, they can get upwards of 40, 50 pounds, something like that. And so, and I think as humans we tend to anthropomorphize, or we identify more things that don't threaten us and are cute. And so certainly people have gravitated a little bit more toward the fox than they have the coyote, but nonetheless, people are interested in what can these animals do that may harm me or might harm my animal, my pet. And so we do a lot of education on what not to do. So for example, don't feed your animals outside so that you're attracting either small mammals that are a prey base for the coyote and fox, and certainly don't bring the coyote and fox into your area by leaving food out for them. If you see coyotes or fox and they're too close to you, scare them out of the area, because one of the things that as these animals move into these urban areas, initially they're afraid of us, and then as they live with us more, and bad things tend not to happen to them, they get habituated, so they get used to us. And as that habituation occurs, then they start getting closer and closer to us, and that's where conflicts can occur sometimes. And so,
so best to be angry at them.
Yep, we want them to be scared of us, because that will keep them at a safe distance from us, and it will ensure kind of a peaceful coexistence between coyotes and fox, and us,
And human.
and our animals. And so, in Madison, for example, we have a lot of backyard chicken coops, and chickens are a favorite prey item for fox and coyote to some extent, and so we want to, we don't want conflicts like that to occur where fox are coming to raid chicken coops, for example. And so if fox are afraid of humans, and when they see humans, they tend to run the other way, that will prevent some of those conflicts.
So this has been going on for how long is your project again?
It's been the full-blown project with the graduate student has been not quite a year. It's been about 9 months so far. But we've been doing bits and pieces of this for almost 2 years now.
So it's really mushroomed.
It has, yeah, it really
It's amazing.
has. Yep, it's not only mushroomed in terms of the scope of our project, but it's mushroomed in terms of how interested people are in what we're doing.
That's good.
It is. It's been really, really interesting. But so my graduate students started a Facebook page for our project, and I mean, we're up to almost 1,250 people following our Facebook page, and he'll post things, and we'll get 50 likes to one post and things of that nature. So that's been very fun and interesting that we've had such an interest from the public. Has been really fun about that, and again, like I said, most of the public interest is with fox, a lesser extent to the coyote, but nonetheless, people are interested in what we're doing, and they're interested to the extent that, for example, we come and with people's permission, we'll set traps in people's front and backyards in Madison, in the middle of a neighborhood, and so that's been kind of a fun exercise as well.
I would think that makes people more cognizant of the other wild animals too. Don't feed them. Don't,
Yep. I think you're probably right about that. People are a little surprised when they see a fox and coyote and they start talking to them and they say, "Oh, that's right. I saw a deer, or I saw this hawk up in the tree," or whatever the case is. And so I think it does kind of arouse people's senses about what's around them. That's probably a good observation.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I know that Wisconsin DNR has some programs too about, don't feed the raccoons and don't feed the rabbits, and there's other sources out there for people to learn about if these adapters come near you, what to do about it.
Yep, yeah, the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources has started a program called Keeping Wildlife Wild.
Yes.
And
yes,
I think
that's
they've had that campaign for maybe a year and a half or so, and it's aimed primarily at during the spring and summertime when animals are having their young, that if you find a young animal that the mom or dad is not around, the DNR is trying to instruct people what to do, and most of the time it's just leave that young animal alone. The parent will come back for it, and don't worry about it too much. But I think people's natural inclination is when they see a young animal without a parent, that they kind of feel like, well, we need to help this animal, and that's not always the case.
Yeah. I think we're going to show a video too.
Okay.
About the little animals that start, hatching, whatever.
Okay.
And what to do in the wildlife and everything.
That sounds great.
But in the meantime, thank you very much for this, and I guess we'll get back after the video and say our goodbyes. I'm not sure.
Hi, I'm Mandy Sear, wildlife biologist with the DNR. Spring is baby season for Wisconsin's wild animals. Baby animals found alone in the wild usually are not orphans. Animal moms often hide and leave their babies for protection. So, if you find a wild animal baby, please don't touch or move it. Instead, go to the DNR website. Look for the general information phone number at the bottom of the page and give us a call. Remember, a wild animal is happiest in the wild.
So thank you very much, David, for coming today. And so there's other sources that people should keep in mind when they get online or something. I guess
Yep.
your site.
Yep. Well, thank you very much for having me, first off. And,
Thank you.
And I would agree with Backyard Wellness. I think wildlife adds a quality of life issue for a lot of people, and it's a wonderful thing to have wildlife in your backyard and to be able to look out on seabirds and fox, perhaps, and things like
Yeah.
that. So, yeah, we've got a couple of different resources. If we have a Facebook page for our project, so if you are a Facebook user, you can go to UW Urban Canid Project. And we also have a website, uwurbancanidproject.weebly.com, and both of those portals will offer education and information and opportunities to come and join us in our research if you'd like to do that. Okay. And we are also trying to generate funding for our project, and on our website page there's a donate here button that if you are so inclined to donate some money to our project, we would be grateful, and it's a tax exempt donation, or a non-taxable donation that the University of Wisconsin Foundation will give you paperwork to document that.
Great. And then there's Wisconsin DNR has programs too. So
absolutely.
There's lots of information on how to have the wildlife in your backyard without harming them or them harming us.
Yeah, that exactly.
Thank you very much, David.
Thank
this was fun.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, same here.